Welcome back, baseball fans, to 1972-75 carryover league all-season look. We been looking at this for the last Tuesday night series, looking at various sheets. We've looked at each team's 12 carry-on players, 12 players on each team that are just carrying on to a following year to see if they can be improved as part of the drafting process. Then we've identified 4 more of their keepers, and then it's just a question of which year they're going to pick them in. So they can pretty much account for 16 guys on their 20-man roster, which just leaves the 4 unknowns, the 4 variables in the draft: rookies, players on waivers, out of retirement, undrafted free agents. But tonight we're going to take a look at the guys on waivers and see if there is anything good out here on the waiver list. Sometimes there would be a diamond in the rough, a guy who is simply the 5th best option in the off season. They have no room for him, and he ends up on the waiver heap instead of being part of a transaction. And you'll probably find when you look at some of these keepers, players that teams have elected to keep, you might actually find that there are guys on the waiver wire better than certain teams' keepers. That's something to watch in the drafting process. It invariably happens every year. We also get some retired players every year who get drafted. The retired list, we can take a peek at this first, is actually, as you can imagine, even more barren in that, of course, they're retired. Therefore, they shouldn't be playing baseball anymore, but they often still continue to hang around the game and not particularly play very well, or they miss some time with injury and then come back to the game. So instead of putting all the years in there, I basically, vacated the years and only wrote in a year when they participate. So this is just simply when they participate, not necessarily if they're any good on the retired list. But let's get taking a look at the waivered players tonight. And the fun part about this is that each team has 2 players they put on waivers. That player most likely played for them last year. Sometimes you trade for a waivered guy because you don't have anybody to put on waivers. So you trade a retired player for a waivered player, or perhaps even a keeper to a team looking for a waivered player, and perhaps get a draft token in return. So tonight we're going to take a look at, see if we can get through half of these, because we have the stats down here, and we also can pull up some splits off of Baseball Reference should we need to. Looking at the waivered list here, this is alphabetized by team name here, starting with Arizona. And then a guy has to be present in Strat-O-Matic's first year of this timeline, which in this case is 72. He's got to have a Strat-O-Matic card in 72 to be waiver eligible. Beyond that, who knows? His career might be over, but you're definitely going to see that the year 72 will exist, and then each succeeding year, I vacate when the player's out of baseball or playing poorly. And tonight we're going to look at all the guys that I've highlighted in the analysis and see if we can bring up maybe a positive split on that. Beginning with Arizona, the 2 guys are Dalton Jones and Ted Uhlaender. And they, as you can see, only have 1 year left. And in each case, it's rather a weird coincidence. They both hit 159. So Arizona has done a great job about putting guys on waivers that don't necessarily benefit the rest of baseball. So this is where they did right. They probably should have pushed these guys into retirement. But, you're not helping the rest of baseball, and that's what Arizona is trying to do there. Why help the rest of baseball by leaving a diamond in the rough? So they didn't leave any. These 2 guys probably aren't going to get drafted unless they have an advantageous split. I'm not going to look at those. I'm only going to concentrate once we get to a bold. Next up, the Braves had Kurt Motton and Tom Kelly play for them a year ago. And both players are in their final year of 72. Tom Kelly, 456 and a 160 whip. That's probably not very good. Kurt Motton hits just 154. So we're seeing some pretty unsavory players performances in the first group here. Let's go to Baltimore, who have put Don Buford, a big star of their World Series years, 69, 70, 71. He's now on waivers along with Rick Reichert, who they acquired in a deal. We believe Reichert, though, we've highlighted 1972. So let's take a look at Reichert here. Buford, still playing left field, but he's hitting 206 with a 593 OPS. That's not going to get it done, and if he does get done, maybe he's in a platoon. Reichert's 2 years. It's 251 and 250, but he's got some power and a 730 OPS in this year we highlighted in 72. 251 year, and we can look and see if he's got an advantageous split in 72 by just coming over here and just checking out his splits. And I guess you have to maximize that page to get the splits to come down. Oh, there we are. Batting split 72. Here we go. So as a right-handed outfielder, Reichert so against lefties, 271, 326, 496 slugging, 822. Boom. So he definitely could be worth taking in a platoon in that year. It's kind of what you want. You got a 250 hitting outfielder, but he gives you some juice against left-handed pitchers. So that's certainly something to consider. And he becomes the top waivered player presently. Hopefully we'll find even better players than him. Next up, Boston. Hal King and Larry Stahl, free agents brought in a year ago. Hal King's your left-handed hitting catcher, but now he's down to 180. Larry Stahl, corner outfielder. It hits 226 and 225 in back-to-back seasons. Yeah, not pretty mediocre defense. Don't know if either of those guys will be picked up. Let's keep going to the Expos. John Bateman and Boots Day. Bateman has only 1 year left in 72. It's 222. Maybe it's time to go to Gary Carter. Boots Day, we've highlighted 73. He's got good defense in 72, but it's just 233. In 1973, he hits 275, the 709 OPS, 3-1 in center field. So he'd be a platoon against right-handed pitching. Matter of fact, if you somehow sandwiched Reichert and Boots Day against lefties and righties to fill in at corner and center field, that would be adequate. That's an option if you're looking for two waiver guys. Let's continue. Next up, the curious case of Sandy Alomar, a surprising waiver member. Sandy Alomar is full of playing time here, folks, but the Angels are gambling that they might be able to reacquire him through waivers. They have a handshake agreement saying, look, Sandy, why don't you go out, find out what your market value is, and if nobody claims you, you're welcome to come back here. He's got 4 years. He's right in the middle of a career, ages 28 to 31. He's a 2 at second base for the first half of that. He's a switch-hitting second baseman. He's got 666 plate appearances in year 1, so he's going to be in the league. The question is, his batting average really sticks? It's 239, 238, 261, and 239. On base isn't much better, nor the slugging. But the one outlier year is 74, and in that year he hits 261. So if a team is looking to pick him up, you might want to pick him up in that particular year. I'm pretty sure Sandy Alomar will be picked up. Very rarely do you see a 4-year player who, frankly, would defy the maxim of my league, which suggests that every baseball player is good at least once in 4 years. So in this 4-year, we're saying Alomar is good in 74. And it would be very odd for a baseball player to have 4 lousy years in a row. Why Why are you employing him at that point? You also have Eddie Fisher with a 72 and 73. 72 for Fisher is a 138 whip and a 391 average, 391 ERA, and 103 innings in the bullpen. That'll probably get picked up. Next up, the Cubs. Interesting, they acquired Sam McDowell to just fill a waiver spot, but the Cubs are thinking to themselves, you know, we might want to think of signing McDowell instead of putting him on waivers because we have an opening for left-handed starting pitcher. And 73, McDowell really isn't that bad. 73, McDowell's got a 395 ERA, a 143 whip, but the card plays much better in 95 innings. Jerry May, just a backup catcher, hitting 190 with a plus arm and below 600 OPS. So McDowell has a shot here. Next up, the White Sox. They acquired Jim McLaughlin in a deal to put him on waivers. And last year they signed Jack Aker, who turned out to be a one-year rental. So he didn't play very well a year ago. Then his card goes on waivers, and they decided, let's clear the deck. Let's clear a spot in the bullpen for Rich Gossage. So Jack Aker is that casualty. So the White Sox here, let's take a look at McLaughlin. We're saying that in 72, he could still start for you. He's got 21 starts, a 391 ERA, 145 innings, and a 147 whip. Just nothing really fantastic there, but decent. I mean, if you just can't find any starting pitching, that will do as a number 4 starter. Certainly nothing special. And Akers, 72, 73, and 74 are all pretty flat here. The 72 season for Aker, it's a 296 ERA, but a 131 whip. He's got a 357 ERA and a 125 whip. So he's got some options, so no individual year for Aker popped up. Let's move on here, and we'll do the next 16. Cincinnati Reds acquired Gary Peters from Houston to put him on waivers and waived their own Jim Strickland. That's 2 left-handed pitchers the Reds put on waivers. I think the Reds will be fine with lefties because they're keeping Don Gullett, and they already traded for Fred Norman, and they have Denny Riddleberger they acquired in a deal as well to be a lefty situational guy. So they're not going to miss these 2 guys, Peters and Strickland. Their last years, Peters, 432 ERA, 1.5 whip. Situational lefty might be his key. If he gets lit up by righties, you're only playing him versus lefties. Jim Strickland, this is a case of a guy who doesn't pitch a lot of innings. Only 36 innings pitched. He's got a 250 ERA, but when you look at the whip, it's 130, and it doesn't look opportunistic on the card. But that's Peters and Strickland. Next up, Cleveland put Eddie Leon and Swoboda, players who were Indians a year ago, on waivers. Leon's got a couple years yet left. Swoboda won, and Swoboda's last year will still be good in a platoon. 248, 686. But let's take a look and see what Swoboda's split is in the final year of eligibility here. And that would be in the year of 72. And we have, how do we get our splits again? There we are. I have to scroll a second time apparently. Or wait till it pops up. Okay, so 72. Yeah, there it is. Here's a split in 72 where he gets most of his playing time. 293, 400 on base, 402, 802 OPS. So this is what you want, really. A right-handed corner guy against lefties. He's pretty much another version of that player we saw, Rick Reichert. We saw him, but he can't really field as well as Swoboda. We have Swoboda's defense here. Swoboda's a 3-6. So Swoboda would probably be, him and Reichert are competing for the same roster spot in the league somewhere, and Swoboda will go off the board first, predictably. And then Reichert would then follow him for a team looking for that corner outfielder versus lefties. I don't really highlight if it's just 1 year as well. I'm highlighting a year when it's a multiple choice. In the case of Leon, we like 72. We like it because he's a 2 second baseman and a 3 shortstop. That'll get in the league. You know, as a utility player, worst case. Not really concerned with the bat with that good defense there. Colorado, J.C. Martin, John Cumberland. I have only 1 more year left. Cumberland, 1 year too many. 7.71 ERA, a 160 WHIP, 46 innings. That's not going to get it done. J.C. Martin has no defense as a catcher, hits 240, but no home runs. So, left-handed catcher with power might be worth something, but not a guy who just swings with in that batter's box and doesn't do anything with it. So next up, the Tigers. They put 2 guys on waivers who have plenty of eligibility here. They traded for Pete Broberg. They needed a waiver guy, and Broberg played for the Rangers. Tigers needed a waiver guy. They got him to put on waivers, along with Fred Sherman, a guy who helped the Tigers get to the World Series. As a lefty setup guy, very good one. But then Sherman has 4 years. None of them are either particularly good, or it's a case where Sherman fell out in a numbers game with the Tigers. And it could very well be the numbers game. When you look at the Tigers, it is Norm Cash, Joe Coleman, Al Kaline, Mickey Stanley. So practically there was not going to be a spot for Fred Sherman because these traditional Tigers are all still playing well enough. So it's worth doing a little investigation on Fred Sherman first, and then we'll do Broberg. So these are Sherman's 4 years. ERAs chronologically 364, 423, 411, 354. Sherman's getting in the league. I guarantee Sherman will play. Left-handed pitchers get into the league, particularly lefties who get lefties out. If his ERA balloons or his WHIP balloons because the right-handed batters knock him around, it's not that much of a concern. The major concern, do you get left-handed batters out? And I'm pretty sure at least in one of these 4 years, Sherman will. So we didn't highlight any particular one until we see the strat cards. Plus, he'd be a guy that has this flex option that any of the 4 years would probably give you the same kind of result. Now, Broberg really struggles, misses a year. I think he gets sent down and comes back in 75. So in the first 2, he's got a 4.29 and 5.61 ERA. And when he comes back after missing a year, he does pitch on 3 days rest in 75, which is very interesting. You can find a pitcher on waivers if you need a guy to pitch on 3 days rest, and that's Pete Broberg. But he's got a 4.13 ERA and a 1.47 WHIP in doing so. Let's continue on to Florida's. They acquired Mike Heedlin from Kansas City in an off-season deal, and Ed Acosta. Both just 1 year left. Both right-handed. If either was a lefty, I'd be thrilled. But as right-handers, they're just guys with 4.45 and 4.78 ERAs with no future beyond 1972 and 1.51 and 1.41 WHIPs. So yeah, if we somehow run out of right-handed pitchers, then they could get a job. I don't expect that to happen, though. Again, the lefties, though, would definitely get picked with bad stats versus a righty. Houston, pretty interesting strategy here for the Astros. Let's go take a little dive here into Houston because they're putting Jose Cruz on waivers. And the reason they're doing this is that this is just sort of like that Sandy Alomar move we saw California do earlier. They're betting on their player that they want as if to say, I think you can go through the waiver process and no one's going to want you. And you're welcome to come back here because you haven't really put it together yet. And you don't really put it together until later in the decade. Jose Cruz and Cesar Tovar, players at different parts of their career. So Cruz, in the 4 years, is age 24 through 27. And he's already moved from the St. Louis Cardinals to the Astros here. But the averages are 235, 227, 261, and 257. The later 2 years are nice. Later 2 years, he's got an OPS of 757 and 761. I have to believe, like in one of these later years, someone's going to pick Cruz up. So it is a gamble for Houston to lose this guy, knowing that later in this decade, he'll be a 300 hitter and a perennial, everyday player. I think he was an all-star as well. And he's kind of a cornerstone foundation to those great Astros teams in the late 70s, early 80s. So it's a risk that someone might claim their guy, but they had to, because we're looking at, this is they've just let go of Joe Morgan in a deal. So Ken Forsch, they got Tommy Helms back in that deal, Steve Mangori, a nice lefty reliever, and Dave Roberts, a nice lefty starter. So they were pretty weak at left-handed pitching a year ago, and now they're going to be very good at left-handed pitcher. They're still going to have a good defensive second baseman replacing Joe Morgan, and Ken Forsch will be pretty much a lifetime Astro as well, or at least through the early 80s. So really no room for Cruz as a mediocre performance here. And then you have Tovar, who really wasn't associated with Houston. They had to acquire a waivered guy, and Tovar has already had his stints with the Minnesota Twins, I think the Texas Rangers. I think we had him playing for the Angels. So he's going to be one of these guys who will carry a suitcase and pop up all over the game. Utility player. He's all over. He can play second, third, and short in 75. In 72, he can only play the outfield, which is very strange. So he goes back to being a utility player after skipping that. And he's pretty known for a little bit more offense than Tovar. But we do have a 292 season here and a full season in 1974. So these 2 years, these cards are probably getting into the league. And so Houston is hoping, crossing their fingers, that they might, that he will slide so far in the draft that they'll at least get Cruz back. They're not really concerned with Tovar. He's not even their property. He's, or he hasn't really played for the Astros. Next up, Kansas City. Dwayne Josephson, longtime catcher, utility catcher. Bruce Del Canton. Josephson has 1 year left. And plus 2 arm catcher who hits 268 but no power. 268 batting average might be nice to have. I'll have to take a peek at that card and see if it makes it, but nothing special about backup catcher in the league. And Del Canton has some decent years with the Royals. His ERAs are 340, 481, but then he's got a 313 and a 336 ERA. And frankly, the 74 season, we're going to highlight that here. So we're going to make a correction here. Oops. There we are. So we're going to bump Del Canton up to a bold in 74 so we don't miss out on that particular year. 22 starts, 175 innings, a 313 ERA, a 123 whip, and then again a 129 in 74. Yeah, this is a case of Kansas City may have too many right-handed pitchers. Kansas City is looking to protect Fran Healy, a nice catcher, Patek Rojas in the infield, a lefty starting pitcher in Splittorff. The right-handed starters, if you're wondering, are Marty Patton, Roger Nelson, who has an outstanding 72, Horatio Pena, Doug Bird. So, frankly, Del Canton would be a pretty good fifth right-handed pitcher for this team. And he's not being blocked. Splittorff is a lefty. You know, Splittorff joins Larry Gura on this team. But I think he's in competition with Dennis Leonard. If I'm not mistaken, Dennis Leonard is going to be coming to the Royals. And upon his arrival, that might push Del Canton off of their radar a little bit. They'd rather have Dennis Leonard because we know Leonard will be on some Kansas City playoff teams. Del Canton will not be. So that could be the consideration as why he's on waivers. But this is a guy to keep eyes on. That's some good pitching right there. And it's a shame he's on waivers, really, compared to some of these keepers. He's going to be probably one of the first waiver players chosen. And lastly tonight, and we'll call it as we get through half of the waivered names, we're going to do the Dodgers. They acquired Popovich, a utility infielder, to put him on waivers. And they had Pete Mickelson in the bullpen. He had some nice years for the Dodgers in 1969 and 70. But he's running out of juice. Though, does he really come back in 75? Take a look at that. So Mickelson, no, that's just wasn't deleted. You gotta delete that. There we go. So Mickelson's just got the 1 year left in 72. He's got a 4.06 ERA on waivers, a 1.52 WHIP, as we like to say very frequently, just a guy. If you're looking for a right-handed reliever, nothing particularly special there. But Popovich has been an interesting utility infielder, a switch hitter, often plays the three positions, second, third, and short. At least second, he's very good. Sometimes he's good at second and short. Sometimes he's got power on one side. So he's an interesting strat card that you usually have to look at every year. In this particular case for Popovich, he is a 3 at second the whole time, and he's a 3 at third the whole time. A 3 at short, 3 at third. His batting average dips, and that's probably why he is on waivers. He only has 3 homers in the 3 seasons here, so I think the power we spoke of before might have dried up for Popovich at this point. But we did like 73, as that's the highest batting average. 236, 280, 300. Let's see if it's got a good split since we're here at the end. Let's take a look at Popovich, see if he's got an opportunistic split in that year. Because that would be pretty cool. This guy's been in my strat leagues a long time. It's nice to have a guy who you know he's going to get in every year because he satisfies the need of utility infielder. So as much as you like, the sport because of Johnny Bench and Hank Aaron and, Brooks Robinson and all the guys are going to be in the league, it's always nice to see the same predictable utility infielder in the game every year. So let's see his splits here. So I don't know how I get this to come up. There we are. So let's take the 73 split and see if it's opportunistic here. Okay, well, actually, it's really kind of cool. I mean, the split supports right-handed pitching, which you see more of. He's a 266 hitter, 303 on base, no home runs, 3 stolen bases, 10 walks, 633 OPS. So as a switch hitter, you prefer switch hitters to face righties versus lefties, and 266 not bad. If you need there's going to be some teams that are looking at as a starting middle infielder, a second baseman or a shortstop with a 266 batting average and a 319 defense at second, or a 326 defense at short. Probably not going to win you a World Series, but some team will be looking for that. in a part-time role, and then you get him in a platoon, and his platoon partner probably won't have any defense, but will probably have a big stick to make, to complement each other. Well, that's it for looking at the waiver list. We've looked at 32 of the 64 players. We'll resume next week and look at the last 32 as we continue analyzing the players for the draft, which will be in, I have my draft right around St. Patrick's Day. So we'll have draft results when that comes as well. All right, thanks for checking this out, and we'll see you next time.